Breastfeeding is supposed to come naturally, right? But for so many moms, including myself, it's anything but easy. In this video, I'll share my journey, my struggles, my breakthroughs, and the resources that helped me keep going even when things got really hard. Wherever you are in your journey, I hope this video makes it a little bit easier. I'd always planned to exclusively breastfeed my future children because of the incredible benefits I'd learned about. I'd watched all the prenatal webinars provided by my local hospital, including the ones on breastfeeding, and I felt pretty confident going into labor and delivery. Little did I know there would be some major challenges ahead. So let's jump in. Day 1. My son was born last winter, and things got off to a really rough start. He was born via vaginal delivery after being induced at 41 weeks. That in itself didn't go as planned, but I'll save that story for another day. After he was delivered, I immediately started skin to skin while nursing him. Skin to skin is highly recommended to stimulate oxytocin, which is a hormone in your body, and encourage milk production. While I didn't see any milk coming from my breasts, I assumed he was getting small amounts of colostrum, which is the nutrient-rich first milk. A newborn's stomach is only about the size of a cherry, so they only need tiny amounts of milk in the first few days. As I breastfed him, we carefully monitored his outputs, so his wet and dirty diapers, as advised by our nurse, to ensure that he was getting enough milk. In the hospital, doctors closely monitor something called bilirubin in the bloodstream. Bilirubin is a substance that can build up in babies because their livers aren't fully developed yet. High levels can cause something called jaundice, which makes the skin and the eyes appear yellow. In severe cases, untreated jaundice can lead to complications as severe as brain damage, so early monitoring is crucial. Thankfully, safe and effective treatments exist. Now, one of the best ways to lower your bilirubin levels is through pooping. So the hospital staff wanted to see at least one bowel movement within 24 hours. If my son was able to poop and his bilirubin levels were within normal range, we could be discharged. Day 2. At the 24-hour mark after his birth, his bilirubin was slightly elevated, but not in itself concerning to the doctors. However, there was one problem, and it was that he hadn't pooped yet, aside from passing some meconium straight after birth. But since he seemed otherwise fine, we were allowed to go home, just under the condition that we followed up at the lactation clinic the next day. Before we were discharged from the hospital, our nurse handed us some ready-to-feed baby formula samples, some oral syringes, and some small measuring cups. Just in case, she said. At the time, we weren't really open to the idea of using formula, so we didn't ask any further questions about how to use them. We were pretty set on exclusively breastfeeding and didn't think we would need them. To our surprise, we did. Bringing our little guy home for the first time was so exciting, and I continued to nurse him and track his wet and dirty diapers. Day 3, first visit to the lactation clinic. At the clinic, he was weighed, and we noticed he had lost some weight, which is pretty normal for newborns, as long as they catch up later. However, his bilirubins had risen slightly, and he still hadn't had a bowel movement. His eyes and his skin were looking a little bit more yellow, so his jaundice was getting a bit worse, and this was all suggesting that my milk supply might not be meeting his demands. After discussing things with the lactation consultant, we made a plan together. So the plan was to continue exclusively breastfeeding for the next 24 hours, after which we would reassess, and she recommended starting to pump. Now, I didn't own a breast pump at the time, but luckily, the clinic actually had rentals available that were hospital grade. The ones they had available were the Medela Symphony breast pumps, and it was excellent. So I would start pumping after every feed to stimulate milk supply. We also had the pediatrician assess his latch, and she was able to confirm that his minor tongue tie would not need any intervention and was not contributing to any issues. At home, I started pumping after every feed, and though nothing initially came out, I knew the stimulation was crucial, so I continued. That night, I had my first breakthrough. After my shower, I was finally able to express a few drops of milk from my breasts. This felt like a huge turning point, and I was so hopeful that my supply was finally coming in and things would turn around. Little did I know, things were about to get even more challenging. The key takeaway here, though, was that pumping after every feed can help boost supply, even if nothing comes out at first. Persistence is key, so keep at it. Day 4, my second visit to the clinic. Feeling excited and optimistic, my husband and I returned to the clinic the next morning with our son, and we were greeted by a different lactation consultant. She weighed my baby and found he had lost a little bit more weight, which was fine. We were keeping a close eye on it, and she conducted an interesting assessment. So she had me breastfeed him for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then she reweighed him on the scale to estimate how much milk he had consumed from the feeding. The results confirmed, however, that my milk supply was still too low to meet his needs, and my heart sank. This was not at all how I expected the visit to go. I was so excited, and I thought things were going to turn around. Because of dehydration concerns, we had to change our plans. The consultant recommended supplementing with formula while continuing to breastfeed. And to avoid nipple confusion, she showed us how to use an oral syringe for trickle feeding. This method helps to prevent the baby from developing a preference for the bottle and keeps babies engaged at the breast. So these are the products that were given to us at the hospital and the lactation clinic. So this one here is a 1 ml syringe, and then we also have a few of the 2 ml syringes and some 10 ml syringes, depending on the volume that we would be giving. We ended up using the 1 ml syringes because he was so little and needed such a small volume initially, and it worked pretty well. So I would put my pinky finger into my son's mouth to get him to start sucking on it and to keep his mouth open. Meanwhile, my husband would gently put the tip of the syringe in the corner of his mouth and slowly push the plunger down, giving small amounts of formula at a time. It was definitely a two-person job. They also showed us an alternative, which was using the tiny measuring cups. Basically, you would pour some formula into the cup and then tilt it slowly towards his mouth so that he could lap it up with his tongue. We figured that that method would be a little bit more messy and difficult, so we ended up using the syringe method. For the next 24 hours, I breastfed every 2 to 3 hours, sometimes every hour, depending on when he got hungry. And after each session, my husband and I would syringe feed him formula to ensure that he got his full requirements for the feed. Each session took between 45 to 60 minutes, so it took a long time. What made things even more challenging was that we had to wake him up for feeds because jaundice babies tend to be extra sleepy and lethargic. They won't always wake up if they're hungry. But we knew that he could not afford to miss any feeds, so we did what we had to do. Sometimes we'd have to undress him or use a cold cloth to keep him alert or wake him up, and that would make him cry a lot. It was really hard as parents to have to do this to him, but it was necessary to keep him healthy, so we pushed through. What we didn't expect was how quickly our son would catch on. The moment he realized that the syringe meant food, he started to shift his neck from side to side, locked in on the target, and would launch his head towards the syringe. It was the cutest thing. His tiny little hands even tried to grab it to pull it closer to him. That's when we realized that he must have been so hungry, ravenous. My husband nicknamed him Baby Shark because of the way he attacked the syringe like a little shark. And the name stuck. It was the cutest and the funniest thing to us as new parents. And looking back, it was these little moments that made us get through the tough nights and made them a little bit more bearable. One of the hardest parts was the sleep deprivation. I was so exhausted just having given birth, trying to recover my body, that I would doze off in the middle of a feed and my husband would have to nudge me awake. After using up the formula samples, my husband had to make a last-minute run to Shoppers Drug Mart close to midnight to grab some extra formula. When he got there, all that was left was one huge case of newborn ready-to-feed formula, so he grabbed it. It was so funny how something we initially didn't think we would need or didn't give much thought to became so precious to us in that moment. We were totally unprepared. The fact that we were able to grab the last box was such a huge relief, especially with a very hungry newborn at home. And then, after days of waiting, it finally happened. He had a massive, explosive poop. We literally celebrated this like we had won the lottery or something. The whole family did. It was the first sign that things were finally turning around. Day 5. Third visit to the clinic. The next morning, we returned to the clinic. His weight was slightly down again, and his bilirubin was high but trending in the right direction. The lactation consultant was the same as the day prior, and she was thrilled about his bowel movement, and she was able to discharge us from her clinic, but she sent us home with more supplies so that we could continue syringe feeding. And after that, we would be transitioned to the care of our family doctor, who we would see in a couple of days. At home, we focused on breastfeeding first and then supplementing with formula as we were doing previously. And every day, I'll be honest, felt like an eternity, especially with the sleep deprivation, my body just trying to recover. But slowly, very slowly, we started to see some progress. Every few days, I noticed that I was able to pump a little bit more milk, and my son began to feed longer at my breast and needing less formula. I remember at first only being able to pump 2.5 mils after a 15 to 20-minute session of pumping. By the end of a couple of weeks, I was pumping between 60 to 80 mils, which felt like a huge milestone for me. I was really happy. After what felt like a long and exhausting week and a half, we were finally able to wean off formula completely. Every day, I was a little bit nervous that things would go downhill, but through the encouragement that I had from my family and my support group, I was able to tackle each day as it came. His outputs were also on track, which was a great sign, and it's one of the major ways you can make sure that he's meeting his nutritional needs. And his jaundice was starting to improve and would continue to improve over the next several weeks. He was becoming more alert and more playful, which was a great sign. And that was the moment when we finally felt like we could breathe again. Honestly, we were so thankful for all the prayers that were answered for us and for our son, and that he's such a sweet and healthy little boy. We really thank God for that. It's really a miracle how everything worked out in the end, despite all the challenges that we faced. Thinking about those early days still brings up so many emotions. The sleepless nights, the uncertainty, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a newborn. What stands out the most is how much support we had along the way. It was that support that helped my husband and I get through those really tough moments and have the strength to push through each day. What I didn't realize at the time was that breastfeeding challenges are so much more common than we realize. Many moms feel isolated in their struggles and embarrassed or afraid to speak about them, even though they're not alone. I used to think breastfeeding would come naturally, and for some people it does. But for many of us, it doesn't. It takes time, lots of effort, and plenty of patience. If you're struggling, there's support out there no matter what your journey looks like, and I'll be sharing that with you. I also want to take a moment to reassure moms that it's okay if your breastfeeding journey comes to an end earlier than you may have expected, or if you have to transition to another method of feeding. So that could be formula, combination feeding, exclusive pumping, or something else. There's so much pressure on moms these days from family members, healthcare providers, and society as a whole to breastfeed their children. But it's not always possible for a variety of reasons, and I think that's what we often miss. There could be things like latch issues, a baby developing a preference for the bottle early on, moms having to return to work early and not being able to pump, and some moms are struggling with mental health issues. You're doing a great job no matter what feeding method you choose. Fed is best. So if you are on your breastfeeding journey, how can we make this journey a little easier? Here are some things I learned that really helped me along the way. The first thing is to build a support system before baby arrives. Having a solid support system is absolutely crucial, and I cannot stress this enough. I was lucky enough to have a supportive husband and in-laws who made sure I didn't have to worry about things like cooking or cleaning, especially in those first few months. I also had a bit of a rough delivery, and I had some perineal tearing that I was recovering from, so I needed all the support that I could get. Even something as simple as having a family member watch the baby for an hour so that you can rest or take a nap, take a warm bath to de-stress can make all the difference. Stress and lack of sleep can negatively affect your milk supply, so please don't hesitate to ask for help from family or friends if you have that option available. The more you plan ahead, the easier it will be when baby arrives. So with supports in place, the next thing you need to consider is educating yourself before the baby arrives. Knowledge is one of the best tools you can arm yourself with before labor and delivery. Although I attended prenatal seminars with my local hospital, I quickly realized that they did not fully prepare me. Most of the information was at a high level, And it wasn't until after I left the hospital that I discovered La Leche League, since it was mentioned in part of my discharge package. So let me share a little bit about them. La Leche League is a global not-for-profit organization that's in over 80 countries, and it's been supporting breastfeeding parents for over 60 years. They offer peer-to-peer guidance from trained leaders who are parents, just like you and me. Their leaders have nursed their own children and are accredited to provide evidence-based breastfeeding support. After starting breastfeeding, I began reading their articles online, which gave me a solid foundation. If you're expecting a baby, you're already ahead of where I was by starting early. They also offer prenatal webinars covering key breastfeeding topics, and I highly recommend them. The more you educate yourself before birth, the better prepared you'll be when baby arrives. But even with preparation, breastfeeding can still be really challenging. So that brings me to the next step, using the resources available to you. La Leche League offers support including in person, over the phone, and through virtual group meetings. Whether you need practical advice, reassurance, or simply someone to listen to you, they will meet you where you are and be able to help you. Here are some great ways to access their support. The first way is to join a virtual La Leche League support group. This was a game changer for me. It gave me a safe, judgment-free space to get expert answers and connect with other moms facing similar challenges. I was able to learn from other moms, and we were able to encourage one another. They also offer one-on-one support if you need. To find a La Leche League near you, visit their website and search for local meetings or leaders. If there isn't one local to you, feel free to join a virtual meeting in another country or a city nearby. Connecting with them before baby arrives can be a huge help. If you're in Ontario, Canada like me, there's actually a 24/7 breastfeeding support line. You just need to dial 811 to connect with trained nurses who can give you advice. Lactation consultants are also available for more complex issues. That brings me to my next point, which is lactation consultants. They are such a valuable resource, and they can offer hands-on support and specific strategies tailored to you. All the resources I mentioned will be linked below. Also, we have a wonderful community of mothers online. I share tons of helpful breastfeeding and pumping tips. I break down your favorite topics in easy-to-digest posts, backed by trusted guidelines and credible references. And my audience actually picks the topics, which is really, really nice. I also provide honest reviews on baby products, pregnancy, and postpartum products, and take you along my journey as a first-time mom to my 3-month-old son. Come check us out and join us. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, and feel free to share it with another mom who you think might find it helpful. Also, let me know in the comments if you like this style of video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.